Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. We will be talking about taking aligned actions even when it's hard. And we're talking about this for a reason. Recently, the three of us went through this process together of having to find the true aligned actions. And we landed on what was one of the hardest aligned actions I think I personally have ever had to take. And I know it was hard for each of us in our own ways and as friends to make the choices we made and to take those really difficult but somehow aligned actions.
And to be honest, it is still really hard to even talk about this because we had planned and we're so excited for so long, and then it happened so soon after we finally got started. So there is no easy way to say what needs to be said here, but it does have to be said. We are sad to announce that our trio for this podcast, at least for now, is a duo. So Jess has so many amazing, incredible things going on in her life right now. She's doing these in-person retreats. She's speaking on human design at these big events, like all of these really big, exciting things. She's got so much going on in her life, and it's just not great timing right now with trying to schedule the recording times with three different busy mom entrepreneurs, and even for planning topics and getting together and talking through episodes and all of the things.
Yeah, so this just couldn't be her priority right now. And for the three of us in general, it wasn't working in order to have consistent episodes going out and just have the process be smooth. And this was really hard for all of us because this was a shared dream, this podcast. But we, as in Kelli and I, are so happy for Jess, so happy for her. And we're so proud of her for everything she's achieving and how much growth she's moving through and everything. And in the end, it was originally our dream, Kelli's and mine. And so we also couldn't just give it up and stop completely because one of us had to step away. We believe strongly that the messages shared here and the topics we'll be discussing are too important to stop or to wait any longer. So this is very hard, and that alignment and these tough decisions took us a little longer to work through, which is why it's been several weeks between episodes. We didn't make this decision lightly. And that's why today, of any other time, we're talking about taking aligned actions even when it's hard. And this is something that I think a lot, if not all, of spiritual people in general, or people on a spiritual awakening path will encounter. And I think it's really important to have a predetermined way of handling it so you're not acting rashly or regretting it so much after the fact. Like if you don't act when you should have, or if you do act and it was the wrong action. And I think very often the case that the right thing to do is the hard thing to do. So, Kelli, what is the number one thing that you like to do to help yourself feel confident in your decisions when you have to take an aligned action that is anything but easy?
So for me, it really starts with fully leaning into the support of my spirit team and my higher self. Because if I do not check in with them on a daily basis, I start to feel I can get off the rails on anxiety pretty quick on whether, if I'm making the right decisions or not. So I found that really tapping into that, making it a priority, that is, one of the first things I do when I wake up is I always check in and I just lean into that support, that support of our spiritual teams, that they want to help us. They're there for us. They are right there always around us, just waiting to jump in and help us. And all we have to do is ask them. So that has been, my practice, at least since I started getting deeper into my spiritual journey, because like I said, it just takes away that layer of questioning of, am I doing the right thing, of the anxiety, of the what ifs, of the of the past regrets or of the future worries. It up brings it all. I would describe it as it bringing it all to the present moment, right? And where we live is in the present moment. We don't live in the past and we don't live in the future. We can technically say that all we have right now is the present moment. So I feel like gathering all that energy for support and surrounding it and just tapping into that is such a powerful practice that I've been able to do.
I love that. And I think like I would have to agree. I think that is so powerful. And maybe for the listeners' sakes, can you give an example of how you do that in the morning?
Yeah, sure. So my tangible practices, I always get up in the morning and pending weather, I mean, if it's really cold or really rainy or something, I might be out there shorter, but I always love to go outside and connect. Going outside and connecting is just the place that I connect best, especially stepping barefoot in the grass. Or what I've realized lately is I've been moving through some difficult emotional times in my life, and going for a walk without headphones on, without looking at my phone, has really opened up my line of communication even more with my spirit team as well. And also with other energies that want to come in and help me. So I'll give you this example, like just on my walk this morning. I was walking along and I got to the end of the path where I normally walk, and there's a giant cornfield out there. I live on the edge of, I live in a farming community, and like on the edge of town, there's some farm fields. So I stepped, into that farm field a little bit and just stood there and closed my eyes. And all of a sudden I just heard and I sensed that it was an energy coming through. And at first I thought maybe Demeter, because of the harvest and the corn is growing, but no, it was like it ended up being Persephone, and she was giving me these channeled messages about light and darkness and embracing grief. And it was just so beautiful because I allowed myself to be distraction free and to really open myself up to hear that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that is something that for anyone who's maybe newer into spirituality or on their spiritual path, that can be tough, right? That allowing like that and trusting and being distraction free. We're so used to being like go, go, go and always having some sort of input, right? And to stop that constant input from messages and social media and everything on a screen, and just be really present out in nature on a walk. That actually was really difficult for me at first. It wasn't something that just came naturally. I had to like practice it, right? So if you are newer to that, like don't give up just because it's hard at first or because you're really distractible or easily, sucked into that screen or whatever. Keep going, because it gets
Mm-hmm.
eventually to the point where it just really centers you and brings you back to square one, right? And I think that is it's something that so many people don't do often enough, especially in our like hyper fast paced society, to just slow down like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't, you miss out on moments like that. The fact that you were able to channel messages and all of that kind of stuff is something that wouldn't happen if you didn't slow down like that. So I think that's amazing. And
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add one more thing to that too, when you're first starting out, because I know this happened to me too, I was like, is that really like, is that just my mind making it up? Or is it like a channeled message
yeah.
coming through? So, like, for all of those that are listening that are just new into this journey, right? Just know that as time goes on, as you practice this deep listening and paying attention more and more, you're going to notice what is your brain and what is outside of you, or your spirit team versus your higher self. I think we can even do an episode on that, kind of
Yeah.
distinguishing,
Oh,
right? What's
definitely.
your spirit team and higher self versus angels versus ancestors, like all of these different energies, right?
Absolutely. And I think like one of the things that I kind of had to do at the beginning was look at like, is this a thought that I would normally have? And if it's not, I had to just choose to trust that it was something coming through, until I got to the point where I had it proved enough times where I was like, okay, that trust is validated, and I felt more confident in it. And I think, that ties in really well with my thoughts on this, that I think another really important way to be sure, to be really confident that we're taking aligned actions, because our ego mind can really get in the way and think that just because it's hard, something isn't aligned, right? It can be like, oh no, that's too hard, that can't be the right path, you know. And that's a very similar, like, where we're questioning and our ego mind is getting in the way. That's very similar to when you are receiving messages and your ego mind getting in the way. So I think personally, a really important way, and honestly the key for me, is keeping my energy both clear and also protected. And this is because, first of all, when it's not protected, and this sounds like fear mongering almost, but other energies can literally take over our decision making, right? And that's a scary thought. So I think that most people just avoid it. They just don't want to think about it. And unfortunately, by not thinking about it and not planning around it, and basing your actions off of it, this leaves you wide open to it happening. So I think personally, it's super important to learn how to protect your energy, and then to be really vigilant about actually doing it consistently, right? That's sort of the next big step, is remembering to do it all the time, and making it a priority. And then second of all, because none of us are perfect, and I believe we're all to some degree empathic, we pick up on other people's energies and emotions throughout the day. Even when we have those protections up, this still happens. And the more that we travel spiritual paths, the more tuned into these energies we become, the easier it becomes to pick them up. Which, I mean, think about it, when you're angry or sad or make a decision from that place, it usually doesn't go well. Or even when you're wildly happy about something, you're liable to make a different decision than if you're steady, calmer energy. So if an action is hard and we're already irritated by someone else's energy, for example, we won't have the patience to see those harder but aligned actions through. And we should really do a full episode also on energy clearing and protection. But that's kind of my top thing that helps as far as knowing what's in alignment when things feel hard, is coming from that place of clearer energy and of being protected.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. There's been several times recently where I had to take a step back and say, is this my energy, or is this an outside energy that's coming in? And really be intentional with taking the time to do my protections, clear my energy, to do all of the things that you mentioned, and to get myself back to that more clear-minded place. Even if
Yeah.
sometimes we're in an emotional place, if we can clear out the other energies that are coming in and get in that more clear-minded headspace, that's going to really help us too.
Yeah, because when you pick up on other people's energy, it really does affect not just like your heart when you're talking the emotions that you're picking up, but it also does affect your mind, right? It's like it clutters up your brain with other people's thoughts and just makes it so much harder to make your own choices, right?
Yeah.
It can be. I just think it's so hard, even now, like even at the point that I'm at on my spiritual journey, I still have a hard time prioritizing this, making it like my number one
Hmm.
thing and remembering to do that every single day. And I always, almost every single time, if I miss that, something happens throughout the day where I'm like down. Right? I
Yeah,
didn't do that this morning and I should have. And it just like
absolutely.
every single time it's just like such a kick in the ass, right? So um I try my best to remember. I'm not perfect for it, and of course none of us are perfect, right? But it's um I think that it just needs to be the goal. It needs to be what we're aiming for, and then obviously we need to give ourselves a bit of grace when we miss it. I do also set like general protections that will last longer than a day. So I find they're less potent, but they do still help, right? They do still help to sort of maintain that status quo, which is, I find like the deeper I dive into spirituality and into all of these different beliefs and everything, I find the things that happen to me can also be more extreme. And so being on top of your energy, being on top of protections and energy clearing is really, really important because of that. So, yeah. And I know you've been going through a lot as well lately. You know, we've both had a lot going on, and with this decision that we've had to make, as far as this podcast goes, things have been really heavy for us, and especially
Mm-hmm.
for you. And I think that I know you mentioned grief a little bit earlier in this episode, but I feel like grief can really cloud our judgment. So how have you been managing that
Mm-hmm.
grief? And you can talk a little bit about what's been going on if you want to. I don't want to do that for you. But the beef, right? Like it feels like when we're in that, we can be so absorbed in everything that's going on that we don't notice a lot of the other things energetically, or we're not as clear minded, or things like that naturally. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know the specific question, but do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I could talk about that. So it was, it actually started in early August because we just had, like, it felt like it was one thing after another. You know how sometimes that happens? And I know you talk a lot on your Suspending Disbelief podcast about how when that happens, leaning into sort of the positive stuff that comes after it, right? So I was doing that. I was doing that in late August. My elderly dog, who he had a few issues, you know, like he was kind of like struggling in moving and getting around a little bit, you know, like couldn't get up and down stairs sometimes, and but
Mhm.
nothing major yet until late August. But at the very end of August, he started just declining very quickly. And it was over a matter of like 3 or 4 days. And it was just, you know, you could just tell that it was just, he was ready to go. And so it's just really hard to let a beloved pet go, even though you know that that's the best course of action, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
keep them around suffering. Just like with a human being and in on life support is almost what I compare it to. Like you don't want to keep them around suffering if if they're not here, you know, if their body is ready to go and
Yeah,
their
if they've
spirit
kind
is
of checked
ready to
out.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just, this happened right after school started for my daughter. So it was like a lot of things going on right at one time. It was like bam,
Oh,
bam, bam. So after, in the aftermath of it, it was, it's grief is not grief is not a straight line. It is not a straight line as most people or like people in the media or society or whatever want to say that there's like process stages of grief, which that's true, but it's not a straightforward line through it. It's up
right.
and down. It's waves. It's here, it's there. It's 1 minute you're fine and you're like enjoying your family, enjoying your other pets, and then the next minute you're back into the depths of the grief because something reminded you of it.
Yeah.
So it's very much like a roller coaster of emotions. And so for me, this is I picked up my Kindle and this is what I do. I read books. I'm a book lover. I just read
Same.
and read and read and read. So the first book I read was on the afterlife of pets, which that honestly brought me so much comfort in those first few days. And
Yeah.
just being on this spiritual journey and believing in all of that stuff, it just was like an amazing light to find that book. And I found it right at the right time.
Yeah.
And then the second book I read was more of a, going through the grief process type of thing for mourning
Mhm.
pets. And that one was really the key to help me understand like what are the aligned action steps I need to take every single day to just kind of get myself into a routine that everything's going to be okay. So in that
Yeah.
book, the author shared to pick 3 things to pick three things that you would do every single day. And it doesn't have to be even like right in the morning. Some days it takes me to the end of the day to do all my three, but I check all three off. So I
Right.
picked walking my other dog, Annie. So we have two dogs. And so I walk my dog, Annie, for that distraction free walk where I am just tuning into my intuition, my spirit guides, my higher self. I water my plants in my garden in my yard. So that really anchors me into working with nature,
Mm,
working with those energies, the earth energies, which are extremely grounding. And
yeah.
even, digging your hands in the dirt, that is just, it's one of the most grounding things you can do.
Yeah.
And then my third one is yoga movement, some type of movement, and stretching just to kind of release that stuck energy, to get things moving, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. So I've been really leaning into that structure, and I think that's really what has been helping me forward is allowing myself to feel everything, to not suppress it, to feel everything as it comes up, but leaning into the support of that structure of the three things. Because I know in my brain, I do these three things. That's like my anchor.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of if you get nothing else done in a day, those are the three things that are going to carry you through. I really love that. And I think having a plan like that is so important, right? Even like I was mentioning with doing your protections every day and that being the goal, but that's hard to remember to do. Having your specific, like your bare minimum that you have that's set, like these things happen every day, no matter what. Having that is is really powerful, right? That makes a big difference in the remembering portion because it becomes a habit and you're not just
Absolutely.
sort of
Hmm.
picking willy-nilly. You're just like, nope, this is the specific thing every single time. And if I do extras, that's amazing. But if I don't, that's okay too. And I love actually the one that, like, I mean, okay, you know, you and I both were obsessed with grounding. We love working in the dirt, all of that kind of stuff. And obviously, like, I'm so on board with that. And the mindful walks where you're not tuned into the outside noise and you're really just tuned into the energy and connected with spirit, those are incredible too. But actually, my favorite of the three that you just said is that movement. And
Mm,
really, I think that's because so often, especially, if we work on our screens, like a lot of us online entrepreneur women do, right? We're on a screen for such a big chunk of the day working. And energy really does get stuck when you don't move your body, right? So even just like you said, 5 minutes, whatever, of moving your body will help that energy and emotion to move through you so that it can be released, and that has to help with the grief process. And I think
hmm.
moving the energy would help a lot, especially with the clarity, right? The knowing of it being of making the right choice, of that something that's hard is the right choice sometimes, and sometimes it's not, right? And so that's why we can't just go, okay, well, is this hard? Like, that can't just be the only measure. Very often the right choice is the harder choice, but it's not every single time. So I think moving that energy through your body, getting it cleared through, that makes so much sense to me as like a really good grounded way to be
Yes.
sure of what you're experiencing and what your decisions
Hmm.
should be and everything. So I really love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think that that is kind of, this was an episode that you and I kind of avoided doing a little bit. I feel like it was like we manifested things in our lives that made us put it off and put it off, because we were dreading having to make this announcement. But I
Yeah.
do know that we took the time. we were careful with it. We made sure that our energy was clear before we were tuning in to receive messages about what was right or wrong for us. And I know that we are doing the right thing here. And as hard as it is, and it really has been really hard, like we've been just broken up about it. But like the actual decision in the end was really clear, I think, for all of us. So
Hmm.
um, it just made so much sense to do this episode today, to have this be the focus, because we're right in the messy middle of it, right? That is kind of the thing. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you kind of want to add to that, Kelly. I feel complete with what we talked about today, and I know there's a few things we mentioned that we can do full episodes on, but um, I don't want to get too sidetracked. I think that those were kind of the key things for
Yeah.
me. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think we did cover the key points pretty well. And I would just say, so I also wanted to bring it back to, if those out there listening have also listened to your Suspending Disbelief podcast, or if they haven't, to go and check that out, because that is also a lot of, I've been tapping back into that when I have hard things hit me in my life. I've been
Mm,
tapping back into that suspending disbelief of, this is hard right now, but it doesn't mean that the next thing is going to be hard. Because I feel like so many times people will say, oh my God, like this just happened. Now, what else is going to happen? Negative, right?
yes.
What else is going to
Especially
happen
that
next? And then they go
it
into
always
that
comes in
spiral. Yeah.
threes. Yeah, it always comes in
Yeah.
threes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I heard
Yeah.
that so many times lately, and I'm like, well, it's been like 10 now. Like,
Yeah. Like,
some
what,
point it's
when is
this
it going to
one, but
end?
I'm
Yeah.
like, that is not an accurate thing, and people need to stop calling that in their lives.
So that is such a superstitious
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. I've heard that my whole life too. Everybody in my family always used to say that with the threes thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's leaning instead into, okay, this just happened. I'm moving through it. I am handling my emotions. I'm letting myself feel everything. But what good is coming next? And we talked about this, I think, a little bit in other episodes. And I know you definitely talk about it in Suspending Disbelief. So
Mm-hmm.
everybody should get caught up on that, because this is just such a key point to when something hard comes up. It doesn't mean that you have to spiral into the negative spiral, because so often we think of a spiral as negative, but a
Yeah.
spiral can be positive. So let's go the positive spiral instead of the negative spiral, right?
Oh, exactly. And I mean, that's this podcast. The spiral of the rose is not a negative spiral. It is that inward spiral, and the self-awareness, and the upward spiral as well, of raising your consciousness and having the deeper understanding of things. And I love that. And we'll link to the Suspending Disbelief podcast in the show notes. But I agree, and actually, I hadn't even really thought about that, but because I'm doing that every day and I'm reflecting every day, that is really helping me keep my energy in check as well. To just be really clear on what really happened and not just fall into the emotions of it, right? And not that there's anything wrong with emotions, but sometimes we can feel crappy, and so we think that a situation is crappy, where instead it can just be, we're sad or grieving about a situation, but it's actually taking us somewhere really amazing. And that has been a huge perspective shift for me
Yeah.
with doing the Suspending Disbelief podcast. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Anybody listening to this that hasn't listened to that, go listen, because it is, it's really something that got away from me. It became its whole, like a whole other beast. So it's really powerful.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, no, I love that. So yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to cover today. And if you feel good with that, then I think we can just
Yeah.
talk to everybody next time.
Yeah, that is all I had as well. And I think we kind of that up pretty well, in relation to moving forward. And I'm just excited to see where this podcast goes because I know there's a lot of good stuff that we have coming up in
Yeah.
behind the scenes chats and a lot of things to share with you guys. So I'm super excited for that.
Yeah, same here. So, really looking forward to that, and we'll talk to you all next time.